to Take Two with Freddy, the podcast where we talk about real life, second chances, and the power of rewriting your own story. I'm Freddy Freundlich, entrepreneur, mentor, and storyteller, and everything I share here comes straight from the heart. If I don't walk it, I don't talk it. Each week, we'll spend about 20 minutes laughing, reflecting, and hopefully walking away a little more inspired than before. So what's on my mind this week? I'll tell you, we live in a crazy world, don't we? The truth is, though, as wild as things seem today, I don't think the world has ever really been sane. As King Solomon famously said, there is nothing new under the sun. And yet, every time we look around at the chaos, we feel like this is it, like the world's coming apart in a way never has before. But I'll tell you, folks, if you go back generation after generation, you'll find people who felt the same. The times were different, but the feeling was familiar. Sure, today we live in a world of instant information, mind-blowing technology, and 24/7 news. So it feels like everything is happening faster, louder, and more intensely. So yeah, there's nothing new under the sun, and yet, in some ways, there is. You know, guys, if you talk to people who lived through the 1960s, they'll tell you it felt like the world was coming to an end. It was tearing apart. There were civil rights protests, the Vietnam War, political assassinations. In the 40s, we had a world at war. In the 30s, we had a global depression. Before then, we had another world war. And then we also had a pandemic that hit the entire world. Any of this stuff sound familiar? You see, every generation has had its moment of thinking, it's over. This is it. We've lost the plot. Nowhere else to go. And what I've shared with you is only the past 100 years. If we could teleport ourselves back to any century, we'd probably be feeling the same thing. But the funny thing is, here we still are. And you know what the other funny thing I found is? In every one of these time periods, there was always a small group, a minority of people who were actually excited about the future. Even when the world felt like it was on fire, even when most people were preparing for collapse, calamity, there was always someone who was dreaming, building, imagining what could come next. These were the ones who didn't just see what was wrong, they saw what was possible. They were the creators, the visionaries, the quiet optimists. They didn't ignore the chaos. They just refused to let it define them. Now, every generation has had those people, and we have those people in our generation. But I think we need more of that today. And I believe we have the potential for more than that today because we have certain things going for us in this generation that previous generations never had. Now, don't get me wrong. The world can be a mess, but it's also full of all sorts of potential. And maybe, just maybe, we can be part of that small group now. The ones who keep moving forward with purpose, not panic. So why does now feel so much more intense? Why does it seem like at this moment in time, it's the tipping point more than at any time before? Well, part of it is, I think now, everything moves much faster. We don't, in the old days, we used to hear bad news, but we didn't feel it it took time. And by the time we heard it, it may have been ways after that. Now we hear things in real time. We actually feel it in real time. Within seconds, we know about wars, tragedies, disasters, scandals, not just in our town or country, but across the entire planet. It's overwhelming. We also have, unfortunately, we have a greater a scope of weaponry where it can be caused a lot more damage to a lot more people in a lot less time. So I'm not saying all this is not real, but it's just what we're going through today, and every generation had its stuff. Regardless, it's overwhelming. And when you're being hit with this kind of emotional noise all day, every day, it's easy to feel like things are worse than ever. But here's the thing, we weren't designed to process everything. We're not supposed to carry the weight of the whole world on our shoulders. As much as we'd like to, as much as we feel we need to care, we're not built like that. We're built for connection, for meaning, for helping the person next to us, not to absorb the suffering of 8 billion people all at once. That's why it's so important to unplug sometimes, to zoom out, to remember the bigger picture. And part of that bigger picture, the one I try to bring into this podcast, is that no matter how messy things get, there's always space for a second chance, for a take two. As I've shared before, I've had a pretty crazy life. And along the way, I've learned a number of things the hard way. One of the big lessons I've learned in my life is you pretty much can't control anything. And that's usually a major problem for most of us because deep down, most of us really believe we can. There's a simple prayer, one that saved a lot of people from a lot of unnecessary suffering. I'm a big believer in it. In fact, I even have a keychain with me that says it, and it's called the Serenity Prayer. And it goes like this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I believe that right there is one of the secrets to happiness, to wealth. If you can internalize that message. See, the only thing I do know that we can control is our attitude. Okay, I can control what kind of glasses I choose to put on every morning. I can't control everything else that goes around me. I have no idea what's happening next in the world or in my own backyard. But I do know that I do have choice over how I react to things. And for me, it means starting the day not with the news, in a more positive way. I need to reach for something that will ground me, whether it's some prayer, listening to some good music, just sitting there with my coffee and reflecting and either writing or saying a few moments of gratitude, or even just looking out the window, noticing the sun coming up again. I call it spiritual bandwidth. And I need mine in place before I can start scrolling through the madness. Sometimes it really feels like that's it, the end of the world. I remember a time in my life when everything felt like it was spinning out of control. I was absolutely convinced there were no answers, no hope. At the time, I had started a business around coupons. Okay, you're all familiar with coupons. Nowadays, most coupons are involved on a digital platform, but in those days, it was printed. Either way, coupons are about helping retailers and suppliers connect to the consumers through special offers. And in this business, we had a number of different clients, but the main client was we needed distribution points. That was the hardest part of it. And we worked with different kinds of chains who would distribute our coupons. So after months of working, pushing, grinding, and really hard work, I got to tell you, it's some of the hardest work I ever did in business, I managed to get the attention of one of the largest, if not the largest, supermarket chain in Israel. This deal was going to change everything for me. The whole process was one of the hardest and most painful business processes I've ever been through. And to get to this CEO, it took every ounce of energy, street smarts, everything I worked for was getting to this CEO. And I remember setting up appointments with him, and they were set up a few weeks in advance. And then a couple of days before, I get a call from his personal assistant. Oh, I'm really sorry, Mr. So and so is going to be tied up. Can we reschedule? And I don't exaggerate when I say this happened 20 to 25 times, but I kept on persisting. Okay? Finally, I met with the guy, and after a couple of meetings, he gave me a yes. We had a deal. I could finally breathe. I was excited. We were popping champagne in the office. This was a big, big deal. It was a great day. All I could think about, all this hard work, it's finally paying off. So the next step was we had to start preparing the agreement, which we were doing, gave it over to our lawyers. Then almost overnight, guess what happens? They replaced the CEO, as happens many times in large corporations. Old out, new one in. And yes, you guessed it, the new guy came in, had different priorities, and just like that, the whole thing was off the table. All this work I had done for close to a year, I was devastated. I didn't know what to do. I heard about it when I was out on the road. I came back to my office, closed the door to my office, sat down on my desk, and I just broke down. I started crying like a baby. I'm talking about real shoulder-shaking, baby-style crying. I mean, it was coming down in torrents. I couldn't even see. The salt of the tears were just blinding me. My glasses were filthy and fogged up from the whole ordeal. And I sat there for probably 15, 20 minutes, just crying, wiping my tears, wiping it away, crying some more. I just felt like the lowest person on earth. I was scared out of my mind. I didn't know what I was going to do. Everything had been riding on this deal. I got to tell you, we were in debt, okay, because we had put everything on this big deal. I didn't even know, like part of the worst part was, how was I going to face my wife? She had stood by me all these months. I told her, yeah, it's all going to be wonderful. Don't matter, even with delays, it's all going to work out. And besides her, of course, I told the bank, my creditors, everyone. And then it was all over, literally in a nanosecond. So I'm sitting there and I'm just crying. And similar to what I said last week about some sort of divine inspiration, well, suddenly in the middle of all this, something shifted. I had that strange kind of inspiration. And I thought to myself, no, I don't accept it. I'm not giving up. So what if they backed out? Who are they to decide the fate of my business? It's not about them. It's about me. I start to wipe away my tears. And I know this sounds very illogical because of course it was their decision. Nobody can force anyone to buy or sell anything or to do any deal. But at that moment, I just refused to accept it. It wasn't up to them. It was up to me. And I sat there and I made the decision I was going to do it. And as I said, I know this sounds so crazy, but maybe that's part of why people call me out of the box. Anyway, let me first cut to the chase and say, long story short, approximately 90 days later, we signed the deal. So what happened? What happened? The truth is, I'm not totally sure. I didn't have a master plan. I didn't go out and storm their office and pull, or pull some genius move. I just took one step at a time. And the first was wiping away the tears and making decisions. I got back up. I got back into the game, and I just kept showing up and refused to let that no define me. Now, sometimes you gotta know when a no is a no, and to be able to take the no and move on. And that's something you have to develop. When is a no really a no? So what happened was I went back to scratch. I reconnected with my original contact it was somebody lower on the totem pole, and sort of started going again. And, the vibes were different this time. Things were, the leadership was settling in and the timing was a little different. But slowly but slowly, and maybe it was the timing, maybe it was my persistence, but eventually the door cracked open. And once it did, I was ready. We tweaked the proposal a little here, found a new angle, found a way for the new CEO to see that it was partly his idea. And again, 90 days after that total meltdown in my office, I had a signed contract in my hand. Now, I want to stop here and I want to say something to you guys. This is not magic, and I am not some kind of prophet. And I've had many times in my life where similar things have happened where it didn't work out all nice and cozy. Okay? But I can guarantee you this: anytime you accept a no, you got 100% no. Anytime you don't accept a no, you have a much better chance of turning into a yes. Okay? And there's another thing I want to share with you. Sometimes what looks like the end is just a really bad scene in the middle of the story. What I learned that day, and many times, is this: the deal isn't dead just because someone says no. Your dream isn't dead just because it didn't happen yet. And your life isn't over because you had a moment when you lost it. Don't let others define your life, and don't you allow a situation to define your life. That day taught me something I now live by. I don't control outcomes. I don't control timing. All I control is whether or not I choose to stay in the game. In one of my books, I wrote that we have no control over the cards we're dealt, but we do control how we play them. And another thing I learned in my life is that sometimes a poorly dealt hand can be a winner, while a great hand may end up a loser. So that day in my office, tears, fears, and all, taught me something very deep, more deeper than just how to close a deal. It taught me about mindset. You see, my friends, I could have chosen to put on the victim glasses that morning, the ones that say, why me? It's over. I'm cursed. Nothing ever works out for me, etc., etc. But instead, I reached for a different pair of glasses, the one that said, not yet, not like this. Let's try again, just one more time. Let's give it one more time. And trust me, at the time, I didn't feel strong or brave. I just refused to stay down. Maybe I was an idiot. I remember when I was younger, I used to box. I was a terrible boxer, but I have, and to this day, have very strong legs. And the guy would pound me, and I just wouldn't go down. And sometimes they'd yell at me, go down, go down. It was hard for me to go down. But even when I got down, I got back up. I just refused to stay down. And sometimes that's all it takes. That's enough. Just keep getting back up. So that's why I start each day trying to put on the right glasses, even if I have to do it through the fog of fears and disappointment. That's why I need my spiritual bandwidth before I face the world, because I never know when the curveballs are coming. This podcast is called Take Two for a reason. Life rarely goes as planned, but we always have the power to take another shot. Sometimes Take Two becomes the best version of the story. Guys, I want to thank you all for spending this time with me on Take Two with Freddy. If something resonated with you today, if you got a little clarity, or even just took a deep breath, that's a win. Every week, I'll be here sharing stories, thoughts, and sometimes even advice, but only the kind I've earned the right to give. And if I ever get it wrong, please call me out. I'm still learning too. I hope something in today's episode spoke to you. And if it did, please pass it on. Let someone else know they've got another shot too. So until next time, be good to yourself. You got more in you than you can ever imagine.